Welcome to Laid Back Law with your favorite lawyers from around the interwebs, discussing the most pressing of topics every Friday at noon Eastern Time.
All right, we are back. I've got Phil on the bottom and bringing back Norm Pattis, who has not been here for a while. Norm has been busy doing that day job, winning a bunch of cases, things like that, and hanging out with the family, I believe, right now. But I wanted to bring Norm on because the legal world lost really one of the legends. Gerry Spence passed away 2 days ago at the age of 96, so pretty good run, but wow, what a legendary trial lawyer. I can't think of any name that's bigger, and Norm actually worked with him for a lot of years, so I wanted to learn a little bit about the man and celebrate his life. So, Norm, how are you doing?
Good. I mean, I've had a lot of calls and texts from people, who knew Gerry, and we knew one another, and he cast a wide net. So I think, I think the tone for those who know him is one of celebrating a loss. And you're saying, how do you do that? Well, Gerry's spirit was very much alive, and he was a happy warrior. And when he walked into a courtroom, anything could happen. And then time caught up with him, and now he's gone. And I think rather than grieve with tears, it's important to respect and embrace the spirit that he brought to the game. There'll never be another one quite like it, and he'd be the first to say that. We're all unique in our own ways, but he definitely was as big a name and as an impressive a guy as I've worked with. I got to know F. Lee Bailey pretty well. The two of them I'd put right up there as icons and mentors to me, people that I really respected. And I'll miss Gerry. I last saw him a couple years ago. He was in declining health and he was painting. He lost his studio in a mudslide out in Montecito, but he was a very talented painter, and he lost, the concentration and the drive to try cases, but he didn't lose the joy of creativity. And I think that was his great gift in a courtroom. Nobody worked harder than he. He'd once say he'd spend 10 hours out of court for every hour in. And what he'd do is he'd sift through the pebbles of the case, looking for a pattern that no one else saw, and then seek to bring that pattern to life in a way that resonated with juries. It was impressive, very impressive.
Now, am I correct in saying that he never lost a criminal trial and he never lost a civil trial like past 1969 or something like that?
He would say that. His webpage says that. I've never known whether that was true or not. I mean, there's a report in the New York Times, I think today, that he lost a trial in Oregon, a criminal trial in 1985. But I think his response would be, well, they won it on appeal. I think what he would say is he was never defeated. His spirit was never defeated. But his one-loss record is unparalleled. I mean, if it was. When I met him, I think it was 1970 or 1997. He had a trial lawyers college, and I read about it out in Du Bois. They say if you speak French, it's Dubois, but if you're out there, it's Du Bois, Wyoming, next to a Shoshone Indian reservation. And he went out there and spent a month with the guy, and I fell in love with him. He was the father I never had, there'd be 50 lawyers from around the country, one from each state, theoretically. You had to have a little bit of trial experience to get in there, and then they'd strip you down over the course of a month. Who are you? Why are you really here? What are you seeking to accomplish? And the theory was, by getting to know yourself and your own demons, you'd better be able to master the demonic things you see in the world. Sorry, that's my car beeping. I was very impressed, obviously, by his record, and then as I continued to practice, became depressed by my own. Unlike Gerry, I do lose cases, and so I became a little concerned about his legacy at the ranch, because it became a club of braggarts in some respects. People wanted to come out and talk about the 20, 30, $40 million verdict they'd won, and that's just not my experience with the law. I mean, my experience with the law is, who did I stand next to in the worst possible circumstance and give the fight of a lifetime to? Some of those cases I won, many I didn't, and I don't know if Gerry would have won them. I remember a case we had, a gang-related case in Bridgeport, involved a group called the Green Top Posse. If you messed with the guys in the posse, they'd cap you, meaning they'd put you in an alley and shoot the top of your head off. So we had one of the lieutenants in that organization, and I called Gerry. I said, Gerry, you want to? I'd love to try a case with you. I want to see you in action. So I described the case. He says, I can't win that. And I said, well, that's not the standard. The standard for a criminal defense lawyer is not what you can win. The standard is what heart you can give. And I don't want to take a beat away from Gerry's heart. It was as big as anybody's I've ever met. But I think that, the I never lost thing, it kind of rubbed me the wrong way in the end. I don't know lawyers who don't. And it's part of the game.
Well, in fairness, like you said about picking cases, if everybody would indulge me, I have a personal sort of tie with them. My girlfriend from way back when I was around 20, she had lost her father the year before. He passed away. He was a cardiographer, geologist, and he was working for the USGS and did some surveying in Nevada, touched some rocks. Things got weird, and he was dead in 2 weeks of cancer.
Wow.
Mm.
And there were some very real questions whether he got exposed because, it was near testing sites with the radiation and different things that did happen in Las Vegas. I'm probably not doing the story justice, but I had known of Gerry Spence at the time, and I wrote to his, we wrote to his law office and everything. And, sadly, they turned us down. And I'm sure that they probably turned down thousands and thousands and thousands of cases, but that's as far back as I know Gerry.
Well, he had remarkable success in civil cases, and I don't know how they had a case, how they selected their cases. I know back in 99 or something, I talked to one of his partners about becoming part of their firm, and they shared with me their client list, and it was about 170 people long, and there wasn't much criminal in it, and it was worth hundreds of millions of dollars. And I'm like, wow, I could live that life, but it would have required relocating to Jackson Hole. I had kids that were young at that point and were doing well in school, and I thought it isn't about me, it's about the kids, and I couldn't disrupt them. I've always regretted that now that the kids have turned out fine, but they had a hell of a roster. But I think the thing to remember him by is his ability to read a room. And this is both his strength and then I think the weakness of the trial lawyers college. Gerry was one of the first to adopt the teachings of a man named Omar Moreno, who was a psychodramatist. And in Moreno's world, you put your thoughts and feelings into action. Life became a psychodrama. And by putting your thoughts into action, you learned to control them and to recognize them and to tell a better story and got better self-mastery. So as luck would have it, we were in the milk barn in the summer of '77, perishingly hot in August of that year. Elk would wander by within an arm's length, and it became my turn to do a psychodrama. So the defining event in my life was my father's walking out the door one day when I was 7 and never returning. And at that point, I didn't know whether he was alive or dead. So I did a psychodrama about my father's leaving. And in the psychodrama, I ended up burying him. And Gerry played my father. So at the funeral, or at the burial, Gerry lay on the floor looking up at the ceiling. And I said goodbye to my father and gave Gerry a kiss on the lips. The psychodrama ended. He stood up and he said, as only he could, "No man has ever kissed me on the lips before." But he played the role. And I think that the strength, his genius was his ability. He was an empathic genius. That was his gift. And that was his strength. The tragedy of the trial lawyers college is they took ordinary people without that genius and tried to routinize that sort of presentation. And, what did Goethe once say about genius? Talent does what it can. Genius does what it must. And Gerry did what he had to do. Others who tried to emulate him don't do it as well. And so there's been a lot of friction. But I don't want to. He had his warts. Don't we all have them? But what a great man. And I'll be sorry. I'll miss him. I'll miss him.
All right. Well, one last thing about Gerry Spence. There was a famous case that has to go down as one of the best courtroom, I don't know if you call it stunt or demonstrations in history, and it was the Ed Cantrell case. Ed Cantrell was a sheriff, I believe, in Wyoming, who wound up shooting and killing one of his undercover agents who kind of was going off the rails, or there were some problems with him. And he was being prosecuted for shooting him, in cold blood. Guy hadn't drawn anything. Gerry Spence had like one of the quick draw specialists, one of the quickest people in the country, in the courtroom at the time, and got the bailiff or a deputy over, somebody, but gave him a gun, and it was emptied or had blanks in it, and pulled the hammer back, and he said, "Okay, now stand there." So the guy was holding the gun with the hammer back, pointing directly at this quick draw shooter, and he said, "Okay, now go ahead." And the quick draw guy was so fast that he went click before the guy even knew what happened.
Yeah.
And Gerry Spence asked the quick draw person, he goes, "Well, do you know Ed Cottrell?" And the guy said, yeah, I definitely know him and all that. "Well, how good is he?" And he said, "He's a hair better than I am."
Oof.
And that turned the entire time, because Cantrell was so fast that he could see when he was drawing.
That's knowing your facts, knowing your audience, and putting the time in to learn them. Gerry was fantastic that way. I think of him whenever I have a case where there's really no dispute of facts. It's just what those facts mean. And the challenge is to let them percolate long enough until you find something in there that you can use. And then to learn to tell a story that a jury can understand that might exonerate your client. Gerry was a master. St. Peter's has his hand full right now. If ever there were a guy who at Heaven's Gate would pick St. Peter's pocket, walk in and say, "Hey, what are you going to do about it?" It's Gerry Spence. So Gerry, we're still rooting for you wherever you are, pal. Yeah.
Awesome. Well, Norm, thank you so much.
Yeah, I'm going to run. I'm out on the Cape with my family screwing off. Nate, good to see you again. I've missed you, buddy.
Great to see you too.
Take care. Nice to meet you, Phil. Bye-bye, guys.
See ya. Thanks for checking in, man. Appreciate that. All right. I'm super stoked that I could get Norm to come by and share some stories. I mean, Gerry Spence is a legend up there with like F. Lee Bailey, Johnny Cochran. I mean, these are legal giants, and I don't know if there are many left. Do you guys have any thoughts about him?
Nate's right here.
Well,
Nate's the giant. He's right here.
Yes, he's a giant amongst us all. I've met Nate in person. He is a big boy.
That's right.
I didn't mean it that way.
No. Anyway, sorry, I don't know if have you guys studied Gerry Spence at all or anything about him? Or?
Yeah, I don't think there's many lawyers, particularly anybody that's ever tried a case, that doesn't have some familiarity with Gerry. And I think I met him once at some kind of a conference somewhere. And I always kind of wanted to go to that trial lawyers college of his, but I was also a little bit intimidated, thinking I wasn't going to be good enough to go through it. And it was quite, it was a time commitment and a lot of other things. It's one of these things I regret. I kick myself for not making the time to go out and do it when I was a younger lawyer, but he was truly a good guy, and we did lose one of the good ones.
All right. Now I know we have limited time with you, Phil, because you're a busy guy working for Megyn Kelly and all that stuff, I appreciate you, hanging down with us little people, but one of the cases you just covered in the MK True Crime, can you give us a thumbnail of it, and then people can go check out the full show if they want to learn more? This sounds crazy. You've got this.
Which one we're talking about?
He called himself Arthur Knight.
Rossi.
Yeah. So go ahead and lay it out.
What a maroon. All right. So I don't know if you got any video clip of any of this, but
I do not.
So Nicholas Rossi is a moron who was recently convicted of sexual assault over in Salt Lake County. We did in fact, it's dropping literally as we speak right now on MK True Crime as a premiere at noon, and it dropped this morning on all the podcast channels. But anyway, Nicholas Rossi was a guy who was accused of sexual assault of his girlfriend back in 2008, and so Fast forward a couple of decades, he flees to Scotland, and he faked his own death first, and he fled to Scotland, and he lived as a fugitive in Scotland before he was arrested, extradited, and then recently, so like 2 days ago, convicted of the sexual assault. Now he's got two sexual assaults, but yeah, if you got this, let's go ahead and play it.
Nicholas Rossi, when you actually read about what he's done, he seems to have done it consistently through his life. So why is it literally going to stop when he meets me? I know my husband. He would never put me at risk. He would never hurt me, abuse me, do anything like what I read about this Nicholas Rossi.
Yeah. So, so that
guy's committed.
That was an interview he gave before he was extradited, and he pretended to be this guy named Arthur Knight, and he claimed to be like an orphan and all this. Interestingly enough, he had been hanging out, hiding over there, and he contracted COVID, and he went to the hospital. And how this happened, I can't even begin to explain. But some medical staff recognized the tats that he had on his body because he was wanted. He was wanted, and he was by Interpol and all this stuff. And why they were paying attention to his tats.
I know. And how would they notice the Interpol? I mean, that's pretty remarkable stuff.
Yeah, I don't know. But anyway, so he fights extradition for 3 years. And he finally, comes back. And it was only like, once he got back to the United States and he was in court, he admitted that he had made all that up. And he was, in fact, Nicholas Rossi wasn't his birth name, but that was the one that he was going by, and he was prosecuted under that name. But he, watch this. Watch what happens. This, by the way, this whole thing that you're about to see, this is all fake, right? This is a fake get up. He's talking with a fake accent. He's got a fake oxygen mask.
Come on, there's commitment to the bit here, man.
Yeah. He gets an A for commitment. Watch this crap.
We were once a normal family, but thanks to the media, our lives have been interrupted. And we'd like privacy, and I would like to go back to being a normal husband. But I can't, because I can't breathe. I can't walk. People say that's an act. Let me try to stand up. Let me try to stand up. Exactly.
What do you say to someone who
It's like Monty Python.
Okay.
And this is all he's totally faking it.
Yeah, totally fake it. And he later
The accent I love.
He faked his own death, right? So he comes back, and the irony of all this, so he was convicted of this sexual assault. He had this whirlwind relationship with this girlfriend, and they broke up, and then apparently the allegations were that he got her to come visit him in his apartment anyway, and where he assaulted her. She didn't say anything for a long time. It wasn't until like 2020 or 2022 that she saw some news article, and then she wound up coming forward. Now, normally this would be a really hard case to prosecute, right? You got it. He said, she said from 20 or some odd years ago, with no other evidence. Okay, almost impossible to prosecute.
They got Trump with that though. E. Jean Carroll, right?
Well,
30 years. Well, 30 years.
Trump, there's a different set of rules for Trump. But in a normal world, normal prosecution, he said, she said, doesn't make it very far.
No, it doesn't make it very far.
But instead, he goes through this whole nonsense of this charade, and it's obvious. So there's something called consciousness of guilt when you flee to avoid prosecution. That is absolute proof of, in my opinion, consciousness of guilt. But here's the kicker.
Hold on, question. Will that extend statute of limitations because you're taking an action to try to get away from something? I'm just curious.
It can. Yeah, for sure. And so there was another piece to this. There was another girlfriend from 2008, similar circumstances, whirlwind relationship, etc. Supposedly assaults her under the same or similar circumstances. So the judge lets that victim testify in this particular trial. We call that other crimes evidence or similar transactions, things like that. And so if it looks and feels like it's your criminal signature, it's admissible in court. And so both of these women testified. The jury convicted him. And so, like, my thing is like, look, if he had just shut his mouth and not waived the extradition, come back, he probably would have skated on all this. But here's the irony: I don't know how this is even possible, but it's being reported that he was convicted of the R word. I don't know if I can say it on YouTube.
Grape, like wine.
Yeah,
you just say grape.
Yeah, but he also is facing maximum of 5 years in prison. So something's missing in that equation. But here's the irony, because see, he was fighting extradition for like 3 years. If he had not fought extradition and just, got the first plane back or whatever, he would have been getting credit for pretrial confinement. But he spent 3 years in pretrial confinement overseas because he was fighting extradition, which nobody really ever wins these extradition fights anyway. But all that time that he spent, he doesn't get credit for any of it because he's an idiot. And anyway, there you have it. That's Rossi, and there's so much more to it. People want to look it up on their own. I mean, it's just he's just a nut, absolute nut job.
All right, now you and I did
hang on. Listen to this. So he talking about faking his death. He created an obituary that said he had died of non-Hodgkin's lymphoma at the age of 32, and there was an online memorial page containing glowing tributes to him under the name Mr. Alaverdian, including purported messages from a congressman and the mayor of Providence, Rhode Island. It turns out, I think he's going to be the one that was sending these glowing tributes to himself on his memorial page.
Oh my God. Oh, okay. Wow. All right. Well, speaking of other great societal winners, you and I did an episode talking about Brian Koberger, and I also talked to Howard Bloom. Apparently Brian's having a little bit of a tough time lately.
They're screaming at him through the air vents, and he's pissed, and he's also not getting his vegan food. He's complaining and complaining and complaining because he doesn't like the conditions of imprisonment.
It's terrible when someone hacks up 4 people and is disappointed with the living conditions.
I don't mean to laugh. I
do.
I mean, it's horrible. It's like with the other guy, with Rossi. It's a horrible subject matter. We're talking about the R word, and now we're talking about the M word with 4 kids, and it's horrible. But part of this, you got to admit. I mean, you can understand the gravity of the crimes and the seriousness of it, and the sadness, but also laugh at them when they're idiots, I think.
Well, that's the thing. Yeah, he's getting punished. He's in prison. And what was it? I saw you tweet about it, Phil, and somebody actually wrote back saying it's not supposed to be about punishment. It's like,
right. I posted on X. I said, he's complaining. He's not happy in prison. He's complaining about. I said, it's punishment. That's why we call it prison is punishment for a reason. And somebody in one of the responses, I saw that, Eric. One of them, somebody said, "Well, it's for rehabilitation. Like, good luck rehabilitating that guy." There's
it's rehabilitation post punishment. Okay, it's like first you got to punish, and then we rehabilitate.
I don't know, but there are the 4 theories of punishment, though, right? Because it's not just rehabilitation, retribution, but so there are 4. In law school, they teach you about the 4 theories of punishment because retribution or that is one of those theories. Rehabilitation is another one. So.
Deterrence.
I got a shortcut for that. When it comes to Kober, suffer.
Here's why it should be. It's good to laugh about it. I'm glad you're reporting on it. It's something you should know because there's actually a 5th thing that I don't think is listed there. I don't remember learning those 4 things in law school, but I'm probably older than all of you put together. So it could be I just forgot.
He's 2 weeks older than I am.
But I'll just point this out, that the purpose of the law is to implement justice because society functions better when it has justice, and not just that it has justice, but that the justice is transparent, that we can feel and see the justice. It actually makes for a happier, healthier, more productive world. So the idea that this guy is not living in the lap of luxury, not living in Club Fed, but the idea that he is actually genuinely suffering to the maximum extent allowable by law is something that is helping better society, for us to know that he is, because we don't, it's much like with an election, you don't just need integrity, but you need the appearance of it. You need people to recognize the integrity. There's to be transparency and integrity. So too, when there's justice, it's healthiest when we actually don't just implement justice, but you come out, Phil, and report on it, the fact that we have transparency, that what we know is needed here, what we know is deserved here, is actually being delivered by man to the best of our abilities.
And also being delivered by inmates, apparently. At some point, he's going to be out in the general population too. That's the state has come out. And
He
said
might be
that
a Dahmer.
they're not going to. Right. I mean, he's not going to be in this isolation unit forever. He's going to have to face the gin pop at some point.
Well, the truth is, look, they're going to get tired of making the noise and screaming and all that. They're doing this for a while. They're torturing the guy. They're having fun with it, but they're going to get bored of it over time, and I'm sure he'll settle into more of a routine.
I think it's also important to note too, we don't want to confuse the moral objectives of the law with the moral. The law is actually a procedural vehicle, and a lot of times people would suggest the law has a moral and ethical implications to it, which I think it doesn't. Sometimes, unfortunately, a bad outcome, which we, like OJ, for instance, I would consider that to be unjust. I think he killed the people, but the law is more procedural in basis, right? It's about doing right, not about being right. So I don't want people to conflate the law as a moral vehicle, which is not. It's more of a procedural vehicle that we hope that if all the rules are in place, the conclusion would be justice, but that's not always the case.
Well, I put up a poll saying that, asking if Kohberger should suffer a little, and 94% agree or say yes.
Yeah,
he should suffer a little bit.
Hey, have y'all heard about the well, it's kind of like the Norman Bates aspect to all this that's come out now. So they're, by they, I mean the cops and prosecution and even witnesses who were prepared to testify in the case. They're now coming out giving interviews talking about what they would have testified to. So there was a forensic investigator named Heather Barnhart, who, they did the Cellbrite dump on his phone and all that. So listen to this, guys. When they talked about his phone being off, she would have testified that he literally pushed the button to turn the phone off. It wasn't like, something else.
Deliberate.
He physically did it, right? And so she said that at 6:17 a.m. on November 13th, when he was arriving at his Washington State University campus home after he committed the M words, 4 of them, he called his mother first at 6:13 a.m. and immediately called his father. When she didn't answer, she eventually picked up the phone and they talked for 36 minutes. This is while he still had, the blood on his hands. And it reportedly, according to this person, she would have testified that when he couldn't reach his mother, he would text his dad and he would say, "Father, why did mother not respond?" He's referring to them in that kind of language.
Wow,
and
like
then,
a Quaker or something.
And then at 8:03 a.m. the same day, he called his mother again. They spoke for 54 minutes, and the timing of that call shows that he was on the phone with his mother on his drive back to the crime scene at the Moscow home. He was seen there, and he was spent roughly 10 minutes there around 9 a.m. He's literally going back, looking at his handiwork, talking to mother on the phone. And the two of them spoke for roughly 3 hours on the day of these.
By the way, that same article, and thank you for reminding me, because I did an interview with the author of the book, J.T. Hunter, on Danny Rolling, and there was questions whether Brian Kohberger could have been a copycat. Well, it turns out that yes, he did pull the entire file on Danny Rolling, the Gainesville Ripper, and those parallels may actually be a legitimate influence from his studies. So I thought that was a remarkable piece of information, and I'm glad I did the interview. So hey, everybody, check out the Eric Hunley channel. By the way, there's some really good interviews on there right now. Koberger, with Phil, etc. If you guys want to dig in further.
Yeah. So speaking of what you were just getting at, he was downloading detailed reports on serial killers, including Denny Rolling, who also M-worded some college students using a similar knife. So he was downloading, and this wasn't casual.
It was a keyboard
browsing, according to these experts. This was a meticulous research, and he would. The forensic team who scrubbed his electronics found that he had scrubbed the files, private browsing, VPN activity, and he had obsessive downloads about other serial killers. And these were found hidden deep in his phone, not in a visible gallery or a standard folder, but buried in file directories that required forensic tools to uncover. He also
his phone got sent to Israel, probably.
He downloaded reports on his own crime, and he had extensive research on his victims. Listen to this. So you got Madison Mogan and Zaina Kernodle. They worked at a local restaurant. It was a Greek called the Mad Greek. And after this crime, a fellow employee said he remembered Koberger visiting at least twice and eating his vegan pizza. So the Wi-Fi log caught this forensic evaluator's attention, and she found the network for the Mad Greek that his phone had attached to.
Okay, so we do have that official connection to where he saw her.
Yep. So the Wi-Fi log said he had been there before, possibly more than once, and the device had logged that network. So I think, so you ask him I think he's, look, he's a serial killer that was, I think, just getting started, right? So there's always this psychosexual aspect to serial killing. There's some kind of release that they get, which is, you had him going back and giving the thumbs up in the selfie, like creepy selfie right after he got back home after doing this. It's just really, really sick.
Well, it'll be interesting. Do you think that that's the extent of his career, that he got caught before he was able to really get rolling, or is it possible there may be something he did do that we just don't know about yet?
Well, I can't rule it out. My gut tells me he was just getting started, because I think that they did such a deep dive on this guy and all his electronics and everything. I think they would have probably seen some indication if he had done something before. I certainly hope not. And it appears that he was, this was his one and only.
Okay. Well, let's hope. And
I hope.
I think that, and ironically, the whole case is tied up with one piece of DNA on a sheath, which is pretty remarkable, because all these other things, I don't think they would have figured him out necessarily.
Well, they wouldn't have known where to look. Because the DNA pointed them. They're like you pointed over there. Look at this guy, and they wouldn't. And so they would not have known to look at him and to do the extractions on his phone if it hadn't have been for this DNA. That was what really pointed them in his direction, and then they used that other stuff to corroborate and confirm it.
Yeah. Which makes total sense, but wow, he's an interesting case though, because he was very, very clever and cunning in a lot of ways, but he's also kind of stupid in other ways.
Yeah,
where his covering up his own stuff, I think, helped cinch things up. It's like, okay, well, why are you deleting your searches on Amazon? Why are you deleting your purchase records? Why are you doing blah, blah, blah. It just like given a total Streisand effect to him. But
Phil, have you heard anything about whether there's any theories they might be related to other cases that were unsolved? Because it seemed a little strange to me for someone to be a first-time, killer and to perform that many. From everything I've ever read, they tend to build up.
It was an accident, Joe. He was going in after one person, and she was in bed with her friend, who doesn't stay there normally. So we've got a situation where he probably thought he was going to sneak in, do what he was going to do, and maybe even slip out without anybody else even knowing it.
Which one was his intended target?
Maddie. I believe is her name. Anyway, because of that, things just started to spin out of control. So there's a struggle. He drops the sheath all of a sudden. He's going out, comes across another roommate, and it's like, oh, damn. And then, has to kill them. And then there's a guy who's in the bed, and he sees that, and he's like, boom, 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 and finishes that. And there was yet another roommate that he crossed her path. I mean, which is the craziest thing in the world.
Yeah, she had woke up and I think saw him carrying a vacuum cleaner of some kind. I wish I knew more about that, but she testified at the sentencing hearing, and it's very emotional, very heart-wrenching kind of stuff. And I know that she's carrying some survivor's guilt with her for the rest of her life, unfortunately.
Right. And Scott H. who is trying to point out that technically he is not a serial killer. Yeah, that's why we said a serial killer in the making.
Yeah. I think he wanted to be a serial killer. And
right. We just caught him early. But yes, technically that would be a mass killing or a spree killing. If you're multiple killings in a series of one event is a spree or a mass murder. So, whatever. But
that's
he had all the earmarks.
That's all semantics.
It is, but you know what? People do care, and it is a legal show, laid back or not. Probably try to use the right terminology and acknowledge it, where it is.
True.
But
they released a bunch of pictures too. A lot of it blurred out because they're so bloody and gory, but it just looked like a typical college sort of a college house, right? You could tell they had like a table where it's set up to play beer pong with the red solo cups. I know none of y'all have ever done that, but it was just looked like
I wasn't. I didn't make it to college.
Just a typical college, 20 somethings, house. I mean, it's just so sad because you look at those pictures and it's like the snapshot of these kids in what's supposed to be one of the greatest times of their lives. They're going off to college, they're becoming young adults, they're getting their education, they're developing their social lives in the extreme, as all college kids do. And it's just to have that taken away from them, it just kind of it's just really, really just awful.
Oh, 100%. And I do feel like in a way that the public was cheated by not having a trial or at least an allocation. You're going to have a lot of trouble convincing me otherwise.
Now, Joe, by the way, you're asking about could there be other things? I just found this, though. This is my show notes from yesterday, but the forensic analysis on his phone revealed that he had only 4 periods of total inactivity. One of those was when he turned it off to do this crime, but there were 3 other periods of total inactivity where he physically pressed the button to turn it off, going back to June of 2022. So what was he?
He could have been. I wouldn't be surprised if he wasn't peeping, and if he wasn't possibly stalking. So this was the first possibly, but he might have been casing other places and had future plans.
Yeah,
I don't know.
What was that FBI show about? It was about the profiling, the
Mindhunter.
No, it's oh gosh, what's it called? It's about this FBI. It's about their they hunt serial killers and all this.
The one with Mandy Patinkin.
Yeah, what was that called?
Criminal Minds.
Criminal Minds. Yeah. So it almost everything I know about serial killers is from that. But anyway, I
interviewed Jim Clemente. He's behind the show.
Yeah, no, but it's and I've heard Jim talk too. He's great. But to me, and I'm teasing about the TV show. I've actually studied a lot about serial killers just because I'm fascinated by
you and Brian Kohlberger. Right?
I was thinking.
Well, I majored.
You're our next suspect.
I majored in criminology, so I think I had to take some college courses on. Anyway, but I'm not the expert on it. But I can just, to me, I see all the red flags.
Yeah, definitely. Definitely. Okay. Well, Brian, may you live a long time behind bars and savor your moments. And again, people are saying you shouldn't torture. We're not talking about torture. What is happening is prisoners are, excuse my language, fucking with them.
Through the ears of the
There are
vent.
pipes.
Yeah.
They're kind of like, ventilation pipes or whatever. And they deliberately keep yelling into the ventilation pipes all night long. So he's trying to sleep or whatever, and they're just irritating him. So it's kind of like a hazing. Would that be a fair way to describe it, Phil?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, for lack of a better word, yeah. They're
It'd be
not,
funny-
letting him, they're not letting him get any sleep. And,
It'd be funny if it was really the security guards doing it.
Somebody
I
said
wonder
not,
if the guards
not
are
proven
turning their-
guilty, though.
I don't
He
think-
is guilty. He pled
I don't-
guilty.
I don't think they're doing anything to stop it.
No, well, they say, well, what do you want us to do? I mean, and it is one of those kind of annoying things. Like, what are you going to do? Are you going to go crack skulls? Are you going to try to put everybody in solitary? Are you going to try? Nobody's going to tell you who's doing what, and nobody's getting technically harmed or hurt. It's
You know who he's in there with? Apparently, there's no separate death row. It's all part of that same housing unit that he's in. Chad Daybell, who's
oh yeah, that's right.
he's in there with Chad Daybell, who's awaiting a death sentence.
God only knows how long that's going to be, though. I mean, in fairness, it'll be like 20 years probably before that occurs. Glenn Rogers just got executed about a month or two ago, and he's been locked up since the 90s. So he spent almost 30 years on death row.
Yeah, I was hoping that Koberger would have to spend whatever time he was going to spend in prison worrying about whether the firing squad was going to hurt, whether they were going to miss, were they going to hit the right place, or they have to do it. That would be, because if I were awaiting a firing squad, that would be on my mind every day. Like, is this going to be quick or is this going to be slow? Right. But I guess now all he's got to worry about is the jeers and the taunting from inmates and not getting his vegan food.
Yeah, as long as they, do it. And again, they'll get bored at some point. So, all right. Well, what cases is everybody else working on? I know I did something with Nate. I'm not sure if that's going to be coming out or not, with the illustrious Epstein footage, if you want to call it that. It has footage of everything but Epstein, really. And a very, very poor release.
Yeah, I mean, related to like cover-ups and things like that, I've really been focusing a lot on the scandals that have been breaking with respect to the Schiff and Comey and Swalwell, and the investigations that are supposedly brewing. John Solomon was reporting, in fact, that there are multiple grand juries that have been commenced related to the Russiagate hoax. And I think it's actually, I'm curious to ask you guys about that. I mean, he was speculating that they're, first of all, they're not in DC, which that's a relief, because I do not want to see any of these potential defendants have the luxury of relying on a DC jury to basically skate
you mean
past.
like Kleinsmith?
Yeah,
exactly.
They're not doing this in DC.
Right. I mean, my opinion is I'd rather you not even bring the charge than bring it in DC,
Correct.
get an acquittal, and then they'll just kill us in the next election that they were persecuted because, you see, they're exonerated by a jury. So I definitely don't want to see that. But I am curious about the fact that that John Solomon is reporting multiple grand juries. He says in Virginia, New York, Pennsylvania. And I'm wondering why you would have multiple grand juries.
Well, if you're trying to roll people up, as an example, like I'm assuming, and I could be wrong, like they're not going immediately for Valerie Jarrett or Sally Yates, right? Or
I would think you go after Brennan Comey and Clapper at the top of your
you
list.
want at the top, but like in any RICO investigation, you guys help me out. I mean, Phil, you did criminal.
That's why
you're going to get the small timers, and you get grand jury their butts, and then kind of quietly and where they live. They may not live in DC anymore, so maybe you're going to go to where they are, so you can start to get them, and then get them to flip, and you just start climbing all the way up.
It all depends on what kind of exact kind of prosecution they're planning. If it's going to be, I think you've got a conspiracy, seditious conspiracy is the federal crime that comes to my mind. And by definition, it involves a bunch of people acting together for a criminal purpose. And so if all members of the conspiracy are equally liable for any crimes committed by others during the pendency of the conspiracy. And the conspiracy, I believe, is still going on today, because every time any of these jackasses goes on TV and denies something, that could be considered an act designed to hide the existence of the conspiracy. So, in which extends the statute of limitations. But there may be other instances where somebody maybe lied to Congress, right? And they want to do a specific charge just on that, and the statute of limitations is like 5 years. They're gonna have to hurry up with those. So you can have one grand jury that's taking sort of the conspiracy and looking at all aspects of that. And you could have another grand jury that's looking at a specific target who committed some certain crime or specific crime that they want to prosecute independently in another location. And that could be the explanation. That's speculation on my part, but I think it's plausible.
So that's what I want to. I'm sorry. I wanted to ask you a question, Nate and Phil, about the law, specifically with respect to, let's say they try rolling this into a RICO, because I know that they were going back up to 10 years on Diddy, but you have to have stuff within 5 years, and then and overt acts. I guess the acts that they're engaging in, do they actually have to be crimes, or would concealing by, let's say, lying on TV, which is technically probably not a crime unto itself as an independent act, is that enough to continue a conspiracy? Like, so
well,
maybe,
if it helps a conspiracy, wouldn't it be a crime though if it's in a service of a conspiracy?
Yeah,
it's not a crime per se,
it's an
but
affirmative act in the furtherance of a conspiracy. In that example, lying on TV would be arguably to hide the existence of the conspiracy. So, if you're continuing to do things in furtherance of the conspiracy, even though the specific acts may not necessarily be crimes, it continues the conspiracy, and so the statute of limitations gets extended.
Right.
I think two things. Number one, for the grand juries, for the various grand juries, that's usually with the federal circuits. It's district. It's where the crimes occurred. So some crimes occurred maybe in Virginia, some occurred. So you can maybe have that where you have the various, instead of holding it in DC. And then for the conspiracy, I'm not sure if you, in furtherance of the conspiracy, because it's not illegal to lie. So it'd have to be you'd have to do some crime or overt act to further the conspiracy. But I don't think lying on TV would qualify as.
I think that's an overt act.
I think
that's an overt act.
This is the key question. Does overt act have to be criminal or not?
No.
That's really the question.
I don't think it has to be, but it has to be some way tied to the overall crime. So let me look it up.
I'll bet you a nickel. I bet you a shiny nickel, Nate, that lying on TV is enough to be an act in furtherance of the conspiracy, specifically designed to cover up the existence of the conspiracy.
And it could be, so I had two theories on this because I've heard so many different conflicting things. One theory I had is that if you're talking about conspiracy and concealing conspiracy, we might consider an overt act something that happens with something that does not need to be a crime, and it's considered an overt act, and that would be a continuation that would extend the statute of limitations, as Phil just said. In contrast with RICO, where it has to be crimes that happen within the past, 5 years in order to relate them back, and then it would have to be an actual crime, not just an overt act. That's how I understand it, but it really could be a different thing altogether, and that ties into what Nate was just saying, because Nate is correct. New York is in the Second Circuit. Pennsylvania is in the Third Circuit, and Virginia is in the Fourth Circuit. Those are three completely different circuits, even though they're, relatively on the federal map, they're relatively close together. So it could be that they're aiming at different circuits in that regard.
I'm sure they're definitely looking at different circuits. They do not want to have it in DC or SDNY.
Right, and it could be a matter of, under the law, there could be a circuit split as to how it works, whether the overt act needs to be criminal or not. I wouldn't be at all surprised if that is a circuit split, and it might vary depending on whether you're in the Second, Third, or Fourth Circuits.
I I'm almost certain that that statutory, somebody I'm sure can correct me if I'm wrong, but I'm almost certain that the statute doesn't require the overt acts to be crime.
No, they don't.
But see, here's the thing. And I'm gonna go here in a second, but I want to leave y'all something to think about and to talk about. So in the context of Trump's DC prosecution related to January 6th and all that, the Supreme Court discovered that the President of the United States has immunity from criminal prosecution for official acts undertaken as president. They didn't really further define the extent or the scope or how to apply this new immunity doctrine. So Barack Obama is, let's say he's part of the conspiracy, and it looks like he is, because you got the emails released now by Clapper and all this, where he basically says, the president wants us to do this. We're going to do it. We're going to compromise our traditional methods because we're running out of time, and we got to be a team. We got to act with one voice, and this is a true team sport, and refers to it as a project. So I think they've got a pretty good case for conspiracy. But if Obama is, first off, does he have presidential immunity for seditious conspiracy? Maybe, maybe not. But if the conspiracy extends after he leaves office, and if you understand that the acts, like you got 10 people in the conspiracy, and if one person in that conspiracy continues to engage in overt acts to further the conspiracy, you're all kind of on the hook for that. The acts of one or the acts of all is what we say in a conspiracy. So does Barack Obama, does he have presidential immunity or does he not? If the conspiracy extends beyond his presidency and there's crimes committed by co-conspirators, I think you can make the case that he does not have presidential immunity, despite what Trump went on TV and said recently.
I don't know. I don't think they're going to go after Obama.
Yeah, and
he'll be unnamed.
That wasn't my question. I'm asking a hypothetical academic point.
But I want to be clear, just so because I know everybody in the chat's going to know what I'm going to say already. But I think this whole conspiracy thing is nonsense, just like I thought it was nonsense when they did it with Trump. The whole crimes and all this stuff, and I think it's just part two of the, they did it to Trump where they weaponized the justice system on bullshit charges. And guess what? Now we're going the other way where they're weaponizing the Justice Department for bullshit charges. And it's both sides do it. So, and I know people aren't going to be happy with me saying that, but the charges against Obama and Clapper and the rest of them are bullshit. The charges against Trump and everybody else that time were bullshit. I just call it like I see it, and I think everybody's playing a dangerous game. So
I want to ask you something. If we set immunity aside for a moment, Nate, do you think that directing the IRS to go after your political enemies is something that sounds like a criminal act?
No.
Really?
It's unethical, but it's not. I don't think it's criminal.
Interesting.
It's unethical, though. It's unethical and may even be civilly illegal in terms of constitutional issues.
Because what we are describing here is the weaponization of his intelligence community, right? Where he's weaponizing his intelligence community.
And what's their charter? If they're going against their charter, that could be starting to get into more criminal type territory.
Nate, you could be, Nate can be right. This could be, but he could be right and wrong at the same time, because two things can be true. You can have them you could say this is payback time, right? And it could also be true that they did engage in this conspiracy. And if you look objectively at what's been recently declassified, I think that is pretty much a good smoking gun that there was a conspiracy to weaponize the intelligence community to kneecap the incoming Trump administration so they couldn't get out of the starting gate. And that's what in fact happened.
Well, also Solomon went further, Phil, and he pointed out that it wasn't only about that. It was also to pull the investigations off of Hillary Clinton that were going on at the time. And these were not Russiagate. Those were investigations about the Clinton Foundation and the money going to Haiti. And there were some very real possibilities that maybe even Nate would agree with. I don't know. But now the statute of limitations is out on those. Yeah. So it's like interesting.
Well, whatever they are releasing bit by bit, Gabbert, for example, that there's more to follow. Okay. They're releasing it a little bit at the time. They've got more. and they're sitting on much more than what they've released.
Which is
I
good.
think
Chinese
I
water
think-
torture.
Look, I think there's a solid case to be made on seditious conspiracy, but that's my opinion. I welcome yours, and I've got to leave it there. I appreciate you guys having me.
I just want to
Take
say
care,
Phil
Phil.
just made a really astute point
Oh,
before
I
you
just
go.
around for this.
Yeah. No, he really made an astute point, which is just because it seems likely that the Trump administration is relishing releasing this information doesn't make the information untrue and doesn't mean that it's not criminal. And I think that's really where he was going. And I do think they're relishing it. I do think that they're enjoying it on multiple levels. But at the same time, that doesn't mean that the information, which is not simply allegations, but they're basically saying, here are the documents. You tell us what the documents say. Like, look at this document. We're declassifying documents. You can see what Clapper is telling this person. You can see what these reports that were made by the Senate intelligence community, the House intelligence community. You tell us what you see here, because to us, this looks like a crime. What they're describing that has been classified and is no longer classified. So that's not them even making a statement. They're just showing you what's out there.
Yeah, it's going to be, again, like the only problem I see is going to be extremely hard, because you're going to have some Republican senators who also probably going to have to be part of the conspiracy, because they also found exactly what the Obama team found to be credible, and they did a whole.
There is some dispute on that.
Hold on, but it was Rubio who led.
I know exactly where you're going. That's why I said
signed off
you need to check into it though, because Rubio. Solomon actually addressed a lot of this. So if you wanted to dig into the case, Nate, check out Solomon's appearance yesterday. I think it was yesterday with Megyn Kelly, and he does break it down and how Rubio, with the information he had at the time, kind of went one way, but it wasn't 100% saying, yeah, everything's great. There was some dissent in the reports and things like that. So
I gotta run here. Thanks for having me.
Thanks,
Appreciate it, everybody.
Yeah, I know when it comes to Republicans, we got to be very, very touchy and try to, dot every T and cross every I. And the Democrats, we can just come to these overarching conclusions. But I'll say this: Republicans and Democrats all said the only ones that said something different was the House Republicans. So if the conspiracy, it would have to be some of those House Republicans, because not the House Republicans, but also the Democrats on the Senate, because not all of them said everything, but most of them were all lockstep, said, yes, this did happen. We believe it. And this. So if they can say we were talking about the information or this, but the House Intelligence Committee backed the Obama team 1,000%.
Yeah, except if they're backing them, hold on,
they backed them 100%. So they're part of the conspiracy.
Okay, stop for a second, because you kind of threw a straw man out there, in my opinion. What I said is, if they deem something with the information that they had at the time, and they did not have all the information available to them, then their decision is not necessarily relevant, because they acted with the information they had. If there was more information that was withheld from them, then I don't think it's fair to say, well, they all agreed it was perfect. Not when they didn't have all the information.
Whenever we get that, whenever we get the facts on what information they had, because from my understanding, they subpoenaed all the stuff and they had the information, but I don't know what they had and what they didn't have. I just know they said we looked at the information and we came to this conclusion. So you're right, there may have been stuff. Like the Durham annex that was in burn bags. And I'll say until that information comes out, I would say this. But if I'm representing the Democrats, I'm saying, here's all the information we had. We gave this to them. This is what they came to. And they did their own independent investigation, which they said they did, unless they were lying. And they came out with the same thing. So maybe you're right. Maybe their own independent investigation was not independent. Maybe they just didn't do anything. But, again, I would have to believe they were lying about saying they independently investigated it.
No, they're saying they independently investigated. But if Kash Patel is telling the truth, that this was found in some secret room that had burn bags in it, and the Senate never found these documents because they were hidden in a secret room,
and four thumb drives,
and four. So that now we're talking about a tranche of information that was completely inaccessible to the Senate when they're making their assessment. So I'm not sure why it is that you're saying that they're certainly not co-conspirators. You're saying if there's a conspiracy, then the Senate Republicans are in it. No, the Senate Republicans were duped by them because they managed to mask this information from them. That's what the theory is.
So what I'm saying is those are conclusions not made based on evidence, based on essentially wanting to put the Republicans who came to that conclusion the best possible light. I'm saying you could be right. but I don't think there's any evidence that shows that that's correct. That's correct as of
Well,
right
what
now.
I want to happen, and Nate and I have
It's a
talked
theory,
about this.
like even Joe just said, it's a theory, but it doesn't. You know.
Okay, well, you know what? No matter what, however you feel in the criminal case or anything else, and Nate and I have talked about it offline multiple times or whatever. I want them to open congressional inquiries. I think that they should, whether Justice Department acts or doesn't act, there's no reason that Congress cannot run an investigation into all of this and drag every single person in front of Congress. Now they can, always plead the fifth. They can do what they want to do, but I think the bottom line is to expose as much of what was really going on as possible. The only question about it is whether it leads to criminal or if it was just dirty politics. But either way, putting a little bit of sunshine on it, I don't think that's a bad thing. I mean, what do you think, Joe, Nate?
I'm in general, I'm against these things. I think that from what we've seen of these public hearings, they're a dog and pony show, which are simply an opportunity for a senator or a member of the House to try having a viral moment by basically not allowing the witnesses to actually speak at all. And they just overtalk them, and they'll have 5 minutes of time, and they'll spend 4 minutes and 52 seconds railing against the person for being a liar or being a terrible con man, and then say, at the end, do you have anything to defend yourself? And then the person's like, well,
all right. Well, of late it has been that, but that doesn't mean that they can't be effective. Have you ever heard of the Church Committee? Have you ever heard of the Iran-Contra affair with Oliver North? Have you ever heard, and I can point to probably other examples if you give me a few, of actual congressional things. And the whole point of it is to expose
this century?
I don't.
Yeah.
Well, you had Benghazi with Hillary Clinton.
And the 9/11 commission.
No. Benghazi there, this century. How about that?
Fair enough.
She sat there for a day getting dragged out, and the story got out there. So all I'm trying to say is that, everybody's, it's a nothing burger, whatever, and it may or may not go anywhere, but at least put light on it and put it on the public record to where people can point to it and say, here, go look at that.
All right. I'm very skeptical about the productivity of any of these hearings. I think that they're much more about self-promotion for the members of Congress than they are about getting
they often are, but usually it's one side that's self-promoting or just saying crap, and there are a few people that are in there. Now
you'll have one side screaming, "This is just Trump trying to cover up for Epstein." The other side will be screaming that you and Obama were doing this all the time. It's just like the IRS, the weaponization of the IRS. Now you're weaponizing the intelligence community, and they're just going to be. Wouldn't you? So the Republicans would be like, we all know how we weaponize the IRS. Wouldn't you call this weaponization of the intelligence community? Yes, I would. The other side would be like, you're just doing this, but he's the only reason we're sitting here wasting our time when the economy is struggling right now is because Trump doesn't want people talking about Epstein. That's what and screaming that for 5 minutes. That's what these hearings that's all I've seen from these hearings in the last decade. So
there is a lot of that, Joe, but there are actually people who do ask actual questions.
True.
And you can look at those, and those are questions on the record, and those questions that could lead to contempt of Congress.
I guess. Yeah, that's true. We saw how that happened to Michael Cohen, right? How if you lie to Congress, there could be repercussions that way. I shouldn't give them the short shrift, the insane level of short shrift that I give them. Perhaps there is some possible utility to it. So you convinced me to a degree, Eric.
Okay,
good job.
And that's all I'm wanting is to have it out there. What I really like is money, though. So thank you, Adrian Angevine. Adrian, I'm behind, but Jumpsuit Pablo, former inmate, did a video on Kohberger harassment, and at most only 3 cells connect to Kohbergers. It's not directed harassment, just inmates talking, but reporting others. Okay, I don't know. I'm definitely not an expert on what is going on in the cells, but I look forward to seeing whatever comes out of this. I like the fact that more and more is being revealed. I like that it's a slow rollout, of information, because
savor it.
Well, there's another reason behind that too. I forget. There's a couple cases of it, and there's masters of it. Oh, the U-2 spy plane was one of the best cases of them doing that. Remember when they? Go back to the history books and look up what happened when the U-2 plane got shot down. Well, Russia said, "Hey, you know what? You're spying. You got planes spying over. I don't know what you're talking about. That's bullshit." And they released just a little bit of information, and then the U.S. would go and they would deny everything, and then they released a little bit more information, and then the U.S. would deny it, and then they said, "Oh, well, you know what? Here's the plane, and here's the damn pilot. What do you have to say now?" And because they did the slow rollout, it was brilliant for humiliation. And I think that this is a great way to do it, especially, Nate, as you put it, if they do have even more of a smoking gun coming down the line. Do you not appreciate this rollout? So everybody can say, "Oh, it's bullshit. Oh, it's rubbish. It's this, it's that." And then, "Oh yeah, well, what about this? Well, this is rubbish because of blah, blah, blah." Okay, well, what about that?
I also think that we shouldn't ignore the obvious implications. In fact, one of the release that came out yesterday, where they're talking about this as being a project, to me, I mean, the obvious implications as to how the impact this would have on Trump's administration, how they deal with Russia, where
Trump pointed that out. He said, I could never really deal completely with Russia because I was hamstrung by these fake stories in the press. And that is a valid point.
Right. And even if that secondary impact didn't happen, which was predictable and foreseeable that the media would go wild with this and start accusing him of being Putin's puppet, unless he spent all his time in conferences like the one he has today, just standing there, with two flipped birds. So, if that was definitely going to have that impact, but I'm just saying, as far as how we deal with Russia, whether we should punish them, whether we should be taking added steps, issuing sanctions against them, all of this stuff was designed to have an impact on how Trump would deal with Russia in his foreign policy, irrespective of public scrutiny and public comments about his relationship with Russia, and that hamstringing him, which was what I felt Trump was referring to. But just as far as the necessary steps to deal with them effectively, if you believe someone is threatening your elections and not colluding. I'm saying if you think that he's actually trying to influence elections, you have to spend part of your time investing there, and you can't have the same type of friendly relations with them because they are positing themselves as your enemy. So he's really having a long-term impact on the nature of American-Russian relations that are completely warped, where they shouldn't to a direction that they should not be going because of this disinformation that Obama and his intelligence community were purveying through the media and their reports.
Yeah, I definitely agree. If true, there should be some consequences, but I still think you got a lot of problems, like the 5-year statute of limitations, and we're talking about the conspiracy continuing to go on, but then you'd have to kind of attach that. So I don't know. It'll be tough to even, and to be honest with you, I don't really even see the criminal charges here because this really reminds me of the criminal charges the Democrats. It's essentially the Republicans and Democrats are saying the same thing about two separate events in two separate ways. The Republicans are saying, well, look, they lied to hurt Trump's presidency by this Russia stuff, and then 4 years later, the Democrats flip it and are going to say the same thing. The Trump lied about losing the election and efforts to hurt Biden's negotiating with other countries. Hey, you're not really the real president and stuff like that. So is now that the conspiracy because they said Trump absolutely knew he lost and was trying to do it. But I know when it's Trump,
the
it's like, no, we don't do it. But when it's Biden, it's like, okay, get him.
I don't think they're quite equal, Nate. I don't think they're quite equal.
I'm saying from my perspective, they are both equal. They are both full pieces of crap BS. That again, it all depends on what your political.
That's like comparing shoplifting with bank robbery.
If you are a Democrat, you are screaming about the election. If you're a Republican, you're screaming about this. And I'm here to tell you they're both and they're all BS. And if you believe one over the other, you're just doing it because of political persuasion. Not any reason, not any logic. It's all BS. That's just my opinion. It's my opinion.
I know that. I know, but it's like comparing armed robbery to shoplifting. Okay,
they both are armed robbers, and I know
they're both. It's not shoplifting.
Democrats will call you guys armed robbers, and you guys are Democrats armed robbers.
No, it's not armed robbery.
All BS. All of it's armed robbery.
The election thing is something we all saw. It's not something. Look, okay, the vast distinction here the vast distinction between these two examples of the election of 2020 and what happened in 2016 with Obama is so way off base because of the fact that we all saw how numbers changed. We all saw how things went overnight and jumped up. We all saw how they were boarding up the ballots being counted in Detroit. We all saw we had so many people come out and testify to our face who we could judge their credibility as to all the irregularities that they saw. We all saw that, and that's what made us feel, at the very least, our transparency in our elections was deep, and lack of transparency was a deep flaw in this system. That's what was going on in 2020. In stark contrast, everything that we know about Russiagate was uniquely developed, and the genesis, the development, and the dissemination was all behind closed doors of Obama and his staff, his intelligence community, his meetings with the media to help leak this stuff out. You cannot compare the way one story unfolded, which is very organic in 2020, to what happened 4 years earlier with Obama, where that was completely inorganic, manufactured, and produced for a particular result, and say, well, they're both doing the same thing. It's true that what happened in 2020 was heralded by Trump, and he kept pounding on it, and even had leading up to January 6th, and that he made a very big stink to help promote that organic story. But the origination was completely organic because everything there seemed completely corrupt. And to my personal perspective, it was a completely corrupt election. The results were completely fabricated. And I think millions of people can still recognize that because we saw that with our own eyes, in stark contrast from everything we knew about a Russia-Trump collusion and that whole hoax that was completely manufactured in the dark by these nefarious elitists who felt like we can control foreign policy and hamstring Trump. And that is completely inorganic, and it's not remotely the same thing.
Well, I'd like to respond to that.
Please do.
Like, so you kept saying we saw, and I think it was better if we were told. So if we go back to even what you're saying, we also saw Bill Barr, who was the attorney general at the time, say there was no collusion. We know for a fact, and we saw even Trump's DNI at the time said this was one of the most safest elections in the world. Right? We all saw everybody say this all was BS. The vice president, matter of fact, said that Trump lost the election. So the one person who was saying he lost the, so you're right. So that's what the Democrats would say, right? We all saw, and then they put out these lies that the election was stolen. Now that's extremely comparable to Clapper and what the Democrats are doing. They're going to say we all saw they had the Russian spy in the meeting. We all saw Trump's own people get indicted,
but no, nothing really happened.
But
we'll suppress that.
His person got indicted. I understand. Joe is saying what you want, so you want to cut me off, so I can't finish my point.
Oh,
at least let me finish, because I sat here quiet and just let Joe speak. So I just want to let me finish my point, and then you can cut me off. All right. So now I know I'm saying things that people don't like to hear. Okay. So now let me get back to it. So back then, people were indicted. People went to jail, right? Trump's team was meeting with Russian agents. So the Democrats would say, we had all these reasons. As a matter of fact, even the emails from the DNC were stolen, hacked, and then put out to help Trump get in. So I'm not saying, I don't want people to think that I'm saying what the Democrats are doing is right and what the Republicans are doing right. I'm saying they both are wrong. And I'm saying it's all BS, but it's all BS based on what your political leanings are. If you're a Republican, you're going to believe all the Republican BS. If you're a Democrat, you're going to believe all the Democrat. What I'm saying is don't believe any of them, because it's all the same BS, and whatever you can say about the Dems, just like what everything Joe said, the same thing you can say about the Republicans. That's my only point. They could be right, but my point is it's all BS.
Your counter to me was not what the American public saw. Your counter to me was, this is what Bill Barr said he saw. This is what Fay Ray or Chris Ray said he saw. This is to help to basically try and counter what we had all seen. That's the same thing as they're screaming, "Let's go, Brandon." That's the same thing as fiery but mostly peaceful. When Bill Barr is doing that, that comes out as fiery but mostly peaceful, because we all see things happening that don't make any sense. We're watching the numbers through the night completely change. We're in ridiculous ways, where all of a sudden Michigan has in their mail-ins, which all their mail-ins before 3 a.m. end up having a favorable split for Biden of like 60 40 or 65-35 jump up to 97-3 after 3 o'clock in the morning. That suddenly they found these magic ballots, and we're all supposed to think, oh, of course, this is completely, that happens all the time, that this turns out 97.3 because, you know, everyone who's mailing in was Biden voters. And yet the earlier mail-ins were not nearly as egregious in their degree. So my point is,
I'm
we
gonna respond
all
to that.
saw.
Hold on, let me respond to that point directly. In 2017, because I put this right up on my X account. In 2017, when Trump won the first time, he won the state of Michigan. You know what the Dems said? He stole the state. And you know what evidence they had? There were more voters in Detroit than there were actual votes. I mean, there were more votes than voters in Detroit. They said it was but nobody said anything to let Trump win the election.
No,
now,
Nate, you're
now,
confused.
but now we're moving up to 2020, where he lost the election. Now you're saying that there were all these different votes and stuff. It's what I'm saying is,
Nate,
there's always going to be issues with elections. But in 2017, nobody said anything when that happened and Trump won the state. Only time people complained is when Trump lost the state and something happened. That's my issue.
Nate, respectfully, you're misremembering the facts.
Oh, I can pull it up. I can pull it up. If I pull it up.
The precinct issue happened in 2020, not in 2016. That was part of the reason we were all suspicious, that they had 103% turnout in some precincts in Detroit. That did not happen in 2016. If it did,
so if I show you that, what would you say? So if I pull up that article,
pull up 2020.
I'll pull up the 2017 article. But if
I don't remember ever seeing
you said
that in 2017.
It did happen. You said this.
No, what I'm saying is I know it happened in 2020 because I know people were talking about it in 2020. So, but if you're telling me that it happened in 2017 also, I'm very curious about that. I would like to see that.
Okay. So just so I can set this up, here it is. I literally pulled up the article right now. Here it is. Let me disable my ad blocker so you can all see it.
And then the reason I remember this,
it's from
the Detroit election rose 782 more votes than voters.
Detroit Free Press. So that's what I'm talking about.
What year was that? What year was that?
2016. So when I'm talking about people, you see, we don't want to remember the bad things about our team.
In 20,
I just told Joe this is what happened, and Joe denied it. Right? Denied it.
No, I'm saying no. I didn't. I'm saying like this.
We have it right now. If Eric is to show it in the and now you know what?
I can't. It's paywall.
We're going to see the recovery. We're going to see the recovery. Well, you see, even though it happened, then so I'm just telling you, it's all BS. I'm saying it's all BS.
Nate,
and no amount of evidence I'm going to be able to show Joe that's going to convince him.
Nate,
it's all BS.
Did the same thing happen in 2020 in Detroit?
No. You were just talking about something else happening.
I'm asking you. No, I said in 20. I said because I remember in 20. What I remember in 2020. What I remember specifically about Detroit and the precincts in 2020 is that their election officials were reluctant to sign off on the results of the election because of the fact that they saw that there was an overcount in Detroit. So if you're telling me, so I was unaware of this claim as to what happened in 2017. That's why I assumed you were misremembering. But I am positive this happened in 2020 because I remember that distinctly, that someone almost got fired because he's like, I'm not signing off on this. And he basically was dealing with all sorts of political pressure. And as I recall, I think there were even stories about death threats that he didn't want to sign off about what was happening in Detroit, and he ended up caving on it. So I'm positive this happened in 2020. Yet, if you tell me it happened in 2017, that means it happened yet again. If anything, that to me, what you just told me now is information that I did not have about what happened in 2016. And I'll tell you, you're pulling up 2016, and I'm asking you, pull up 2020. Pull 2020.
I'm just
I'm telling you
exactly
this.
Okay, well, in fairness, it's actually very disturbing that if it happened both times.
It should never happen. It should never ever happen.
What I'm saying is that Joe, it's funny because I'm actually agreeing with you. I feel like I'm in a weird position where I'm arguing with you, but I agree with you. And that's
I don't even understand this claim. This is ridiculous. Your counterclaim doesn't make any sense to me. So you're saying that Trump would try to steal an election. His effort to steal an election is by plugging in votes in Detroit. That's where he's going. That was the claim that the Democrats are making. Oh, yeah, the Trump's whole plan. How am I going to steal this election? I'm going to get a whole bunch of black voters to come out and vote in crazy numbers. That's how I'm going to do it. Tell me how that makes any sense. That was his goal as to how he's stealing this election.
Absolutely not. I am not saying that at all. My whole thing is I am not saying that at all. That is false. What you just which you just said
So what
that I'm saying. I am not saying that at all.
So then, what does
I'm
that claim of
saying is what
2016 even mean?
Joe,
What does it mean?
Joe, look at what I just put up.
More votes were not cast in Detroit in 2020.
I didn't say there are people than registered voters.
What I
See,
I'm
that's
saying,
that's the semantic. No, that's the
No,
semantics.
hold on. They're quoting Trump's tweet. Okay, Trump literally said, "In Detroit, there are far more votes than there are people."
Okay, so
I'm just saying. So
no, that did happen in 2016. Okay. So what I'm saying, Joe, is that
I'm gonna find it. I'm gonna find it myself.
My retort to you was that it's selective outrage, because in 2020 when 2016 when Trump won, nobody cared about there being more votes than voters. In 2020 when Trump loses, now it's a big problem, and now it's democracy's being it's going under blah 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 blah. And I'm saying the outrage isn't similar. Like someone like me, it was concerning in 2017 and it was concerning in 2020. But I think when you put these political lenses, it's only concerning in 2020 if you're a Republican, and it's only concerning in 2016 if you're a Democrat. To me, it's concerning both times. And my retort to everything that we've been talking about is that we have this selective outrage because I know the people in the chat want to see the selective outrage. But my personal consistency is that both sides are doing the same playbook with the same BS. And I'm just tired of playing the game. I'm just saying they both are the same. It's the same story, but just different colors. One is red and one is blue.
No, I'm pulling up here from 2020, and when there was a refusal from the Wayne County Commissioner to certify the election results, and then he ended up caving. I think even a few hours later, and they were asking him as to, and what I found here was that there was this was from 2020. If you want me to share over here.
Just fine. By the way, we've gotten incredibly sidetracked from the basic point.
Oh yeah. Well, I know
that's and the Flamingo Key is hitting on what I was hitting. So, I shared the screen.
Trump won the state. Trump won the state in 2016, and that's what.
Yeah, I understand he won the state.
That was one of the things people were pointing to. Look, somebody's adding extra votes. Trump didn't really win. It was all It was Democrats BS. I was like, really?
Of course.
That's what they brought up, right?
See, this is the dumbest thing in the world, because you can't. It doesn't even make sense. Why? Who? How do you think that votes?
They did initiate a recount, Nate. Hillary did. So.
Yeah. Of course, yeah, because obviously she lost the state.
Well, and
folks too. So,
and it was noticed because it was the first time a Republican had won Michigan in forever.
Right. And what I'll tell you is that if in fact we all seen what happens in New York City, we all seen what happens in Philadelphia, we all seen what happens in Fulton County, in these areas which are Democrat strongholds. That's where we end up seeing these excessive vote counts. To claim for a moment that the 2016 election was in some way fraud by the Republicans, in that they bumped up the vote inside the Democratic stronghold.
I don't think Nate's claiming that or anybody.
I am not claiming it. I'm saying that's ridiculous. That's crazy. That sounds insane. But
Yeah,
now we fast forward to 2022. That makes sense. That's not insane. That's not crazy. So you're right, Joe. It's insane. It's crazy to think that in 2016. And I think it's insane and crazy to think that in 2020. But again, that's
what I'm saying is no, it's not at all insane and crazy. The same way we will accept an admission of an out of court statement if it's an admission against interest, but not if it's something that's self-serving. So that's exactly what we're seeing over here. To the extent that things are happening, that there's some sort of perversions of the ballot count in a Democratic stronghold, to the extent that there are perversions that despite that the Republican wins, we say, oh, okay, that's something that I don't care about that, because it certainly is not some way that helped him win. If anything, it likely hurt his chances of winning. And then we look to the next election where we loses, we can say, hey, these perversions that happen there, that could be relevant. Do you disagree with that premise?
No.
So if you agree with that premise, if you agree with that premise, I'm not sure why it is you even introduced this whole thing about what happened in 2016. You're saying because we didn't bring it up and we don't care about what happened in 2016. You're right, we don't care about what happened there in 2016, because what happened there in 2016 was almost certainly likely set up to try and skunk his chances in Michigan, and it failed. As opposed to what happened in 2020, where it was an effort to skunk his efforts and it succeeded.
Joe,
that's the difference.
So I believe the flaw in your logic is motivation, because you're talking about motivations where I'm talking about the facts of actually what happened. So what you're doing, you've taken the facts and you've come to these motivations. Well, this didn't help Trump, so this is irrelevant, but this did help Trump, is irrelevant. And I'm saying that's not the way it works. Generally, you work with the facts that you have on the ground and you determine how relevant they are to the overall story. I think the fact that there were more votes than voters in Detroit in 2016 and Trump won that state, that's a fact that matters. That's a fact.
Can we fast forward to 2024?
And then if we go to 2020, I think that but when it comes to 2020, I think that also matters too. And you were arguing about the 2020 version, and I'm saying the same thing happened in 2016. And and I was explaining, my point was how the Democrats argued about one, and we all said it was BS. The Republicans argued about another and saying it's BS, and I'm saying they're both BS. And you're saying that it's not because of the reason. So that our only disagreement is which one matters, not that they both don't stink high.
Oh, and by the fact that, by the way, I do want to point out the fact that Detroit can't figure out how to do a normal election count is insanity, and that it keeps getting screwed up is insanity, and this seems to happen in all these major cities where, like Philadelphia, which is notorious for its corruption, like Fulton County, Atlanta, that all of it's insanity, and that's another reason why Republicans are so outraged that there's very blatant cheating. Because in these areas which are Democratic strongholds, that's where the numbers always seem to go insanely wonky. When there's no oversight, there's no transparency, the numbers go wonky. And we know, so when you have motive plus opportunity, because they keep screaming how this guy is the second coming of HH, of Adolf. So now you're going to tell me now that they have motive and opportunity, and I shouldn't think that if in fact he loses, it's because they actually perpetrated the crime. That's the difference there, Nate. So but I'm not sure how we ended up going down this road. I think you were comparing the intelligence community issues.
Yeah, we're
right.
And I said they were both BS and they were all BS, and that's how we kind of went down this road.
Yeah.
All right. Well, either way, I don't think they're actually comparable in the sense of weaponizing the actual intelligence community is a bit darker. And that's where I said it depends on what their charter is. If they're deliberately misfeeding information to the public, things like that, there are problems. And, Gina Haspel, CIA, there's some things tying there that meeting with Clinton on the tarmac, which with was it Loretta Lynch, was very interesting. And Solomon gave a different angle on that it had nothing to do with Hillary Clinton's server. It was again about the Clinton Foundation. And I was like, oh, okay. So I feel like there's a lot of interesting information that even if nobody is ever convicted, just getting it out to the public to where people can read what happened or see what happened and then determine on their own what they think. And, obviously team players are going to say it's a nothing burger and we don't care. But I do think as many facts as possibly being revealed to the public is always a better thing.
And I'll tell you, I agree that there's no way Clinton's going to face any accountability for her Clinton Foundation scandal, which is one of, seemingly half a dozen scandals, massive scandals in Hillary Clinton's career.
But her legacy hopefully will. Hopefully it'll be like a little asterisk next to her name in history.
Well, I think that her legacy is long cemented on each side of the aisle, where on the right side of the aisle, we're all going to recognize her as being someone who basically continued failing upwards and was engaged in one self-promotional, self-enriching scandal after another, from and masking her incompetence over and over again, whether it's the Clinton Foundation and having people pay lots of money and the guest speaking fees and what happened with her with Whitewater. You can go all the way back to Whitewater in the 90s, in the 80s and 90s. You can to her Benghazi complete debacle there. She had this is a woman whose entire career has been defined by scandal, much more than any achievement she's ever accomplished. And that's her legacy from the right side of the aisle. From the wrong side of the aisle, she's a hero. So,
well, Joe, give it time. You know, a lot of history, and some of the historians that I watch, I really do appreciate when they're like, we won't even judge a president until they're at least 20 years out of office. And I think that's a good rule, because you're talking about Hillary, for example. Have you heard of President Warren Harding?
Warren G. Harding. That's
I know of him, but I don't know anything about what he did.
Well, he is deemed to be kind of one of the worst presidents in history and very corrupt, right? When he died in office, he was incredibly popular. And he was very popular for a few years. But over time, you know, as we don't have our personal feelings one way or another, I think history can win out. And that's where I think that exposing this stuff, yeah, you're right. For us right now, it's very, very frustrating. But what about your grandkids and your great-grandkids, Joe? You know, down the line, at least
the legacy.
I think that is very important. And by the way, another person who thinks this is so important is Trump. You could tell everything Trump does is so focused on his legacy.
100%.
It is, and that's why he takes a lot of this stuff super, you know, personally. So
we all live in trying to enrich our legacy. All of our motivations are for our legacy, because legacy is really defined as your offspring, as your reputation, as the money you leave behind. All in terms of legacy are what we leave behind, and I think that's where we're motivated, we're hardwired to actually care about giving meaning to our existence by creating a strong legacy. And we understand that our days here and the number of times we'll circle the sun are very limited, but the legacy is what is the continuation of our existence long after we've passed. And that's really the only way we can give genuine meaning to our lives, is by having a rich legacy. And for most of us, it's children, right? For many of us, you know, if you're not building a foundation or a corporation or, you know, reputationally known, it is your children being your legacy. But we, in one way or another, and certainly as you get older, it's not surprising at all that Trump would be fixating on that. The older you get, the more fixated you become on your legacy.
Well, with that said, I actually got to run.
I think it's time for us
wrapping up. Yeah,
yeah,
we're wrapping up now anyway. Paul Hunter. Eric,
I got nothing going on.
No.
So, yeah.
Joe has something going on. We don't care. No, anyway, I'm just kidding. Joe's got something going on almost every night. And it definitely, everybody, please check it out. Nate, I know you've got something coming out that we did.
Yes, we have our Epstein video. I think we should send that to Joe too, so you can go over it. It's a fascinating video on the Epstein stuff. CBS did a breakdown. It's really fascinating. I should definitely send it to you, because I would like to see you break it down on your show.
Sure, I'll be happy to do that.
Tell us if we are full of it or not, or you know.
Yeah, and for the and before I get out of here, for those of the people who are in the chat who say Nate is I hate Nate, I'm going to say it. I don't actually care. And actually, to be funny, I always tell Eric, I love the hate, because I don't care if you're a Republican or if you're a Democrat. When I go on a Pisco's show, which I'm about to go on, they're going to yell at me and tell me I'm a MAGA extremist, and I come here and they tell me but the one thing that you will not say is that I am not consistent. I'm just saying they're all BS. I don't believe in more. I don't care what you think. And that's just how I feel about it. Now, I can be convinced, as Joe and Eric have done many times, but at these issues, I'm just not convinced. So with that.
All right. Well, I want to pitch something that I have done lately. I mentioned it earlier. I've been, doing interviews.
He wants to go. No,
I gotta go because I'm running late. I'll see you guys.
Yeah, no, go, Nate. See you. Thanks. Anyway, really quickly before we go, I've been doing a series of interviews lately. I'm really proud of the interview I just put out yesterday. I don't know if people are familiar with it, but there was the Great Station Fire in Providence, Rhode Island. Is the worst concert disaster in modern history. Over 100 people died. 200 others were injured, and we're talking about dying in a fire. Okay, it is the worst of the worst of the worst. Horrible. You cannot think of much more. And I did an interview with Pyro John Watkins, who he did the pyro for Kiss, for Van Halen, for all these top bands. So I mean, this guy's the top of the world, you know, with all the explosions and everything going on. It's a fascinating case. What went wrong? Why did all these people die? All these mistakes that were made along the way. And that's just on the channel under my name. I hope you consider checking it out. There,
You should.
legal considerations, and honestly, pay attention to it. It could save your life.
Like,
I'm not kidding.
subscribe, and drop a comment. It feeds the algorithm.
What
So
Joe
there you
said.
go.
Thank
Godspeed,
you
everyone.
all very much.